Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of TCG Talk, back today with another video. And in today's video, we're going to go over the common and rare stealth cards that were given to new in the Part the Misfill set that we have seen mostly in the Blitz decks, and kind of talk about, I think, my initial thoughts on the implications on each individual one, and maybe give you a little bit of like rudder steering on which ones to start with, because I do think some of them are just naturally more consistent than others, and I'll kind of give you my reasons as to why as we go through the video. So if you're new to the channel, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. Hopefully you enjoy your stay. If you're a long-standing supporter, thank you so much as always. Feel free to check out the Discord down below, as well as the channel membership for some extra good stuff and access to a great community. And yeah, we'll get right into it. So I'll pull this up here. So I'm taking my opinions just with a grain of salt on this. I'm taking my opinions from two things. One, I'm taking it from my initial games with her. I've been playing with her on Talishar and Tabletop Simulator, not like hundreds or anything like that. Like everyone else, I've played like 20 or 30 games with these specific cards against people, and most of my games have not been random. They've been against people I know, so because we've been trying to figure out the cards. So I see it as quality initial, like, implications, right? Also, this comes from my play with Arachne, because a lot of these stealth cards have the same on hit, or they not same on hit, but they care about the same things that Arachne cards care about. Like, for example, as we're looking here, Desires of the Flesh cares about attack action cards, just like Annihilate the Arm does. Mind's Desire cares about non-attack action cards, just like Slay the Scholars does, so on and so forth. So, and then Our Desire cares just like Leave No Witnesses does, right? Doesn't quite have the same on hit, but they care about the same type of card. So a lot of the mental thought of it is very similar to an Arachne deck, in my opinion. So I'm gonna go over which cards I think are the most consistent and why, and then the ones that are kind of like, I think there's three really consistent ones, there's two kind of like meta dependent ones, and then there's two that I think, in my opinion, aren't as strong. Not that they shouldn't be played, they're just not as consistent when it comes to it, because News ability reads, whenever you attack with a stealth card, it gains, when the chain link resolves, banish all action cards defending this. So what this does is, when you have a card like, let's say, Our Desire Body, it says when it hits a hero, banish the top card of their deck. Whenever this banishes a red card, draw a card and gain 1 life, right? So what this does is, if you block this, like, so if a Katsu blocks this for 3 with a Soul Beat Strike, just saying a random red card, even if I don't have an attack reaction and it doesn't hit, it'll banish that Soul Beat Strike. So I will gain a life from this bottom line of text, because this technically did banish a card, since this is the one doing News ability's effect, and I'll gain a life and draw a card. So it's really good, because you tell your opponent when you attack with certain things, like when you attack with Desires of Flesh, you tell your opponent, if you let this hit, you're going to let me banish, and I could potentially banish an attack action and gain a life anyway. If you don't let this hit and you block, well, if you block with attack action cards, for every attack action card you block with, I'm going to gain a life. There's so many implications to this. One of the most initial ones that I've really enjoyed is, like, when I'm at, like, we're both in single digit life totals, right? Maybe it's like 6 to 6 or something, or let's say even lower, 3 to 3. And so I play a Desires of Flesh with 2 cards in hand, and my opponent's like, well, I got to play around a Hiss here, but I'm a Katsu or I'm a Zen, and I only have attack action cards in my deck for the most part. They block with 2 attack action cards to play around the attack reaction, and I gain 2 life. So I just took 2 cards from your hand, and now instead of 3 to 3 life totals, it's now 5 to 3, right? So you essentially, gained, a lot of value off of that. So you can do these really unique things, where I have found myself in a 15 turn cycle game gaining anywhere from 5 to 7 life in a game, which is pretty substantial, right? It's basically, you have your mini Sigil of Solaces within your deck, and it can really change the course of the game in the late game, and it just affects how your opponent has to block, which in Assassin is huge. So the 3 that are the most useful, in my opinion, number 1 to me is Desires of Flesh. This one cares about attack action cards, which is the most consistent thing in the game right now, with the exception of maybe Warrior, right? You're going to get this to hit a lot. It's a 0 for 3 that cares. It's basically Annihilate the Armed, but for new, and I have found it to be very consistent. I almost always gain life off of this, depending on the deck, except for 1 or 2 Warrior games I've had. But even so, at the very worst, it's going to banish a card off the top of their deck, which then thins their deck and makes it worse. So this one is definitely good. It prevents your opponent from not wanting to block with attack action cards, but in the late game when they have to protect their life total, this could almost instantly mean gaining 2 life. I've even had some really nice situations where, like, I have this and I have the 1 for 3 The one with the snake on it. The 1 for 3 that ends up. We'll do this on the fly here because it's gonna bug me that I don't remember it. But it's the one here. It is Venomous Bite. That's 1 for 3, and then you create a Fang Strike, so it becomes a 1 for 4. I've had times where they've blocked 3 on me on blocked 6 on Desires of Flesh, and I came in with Venomous Bite and a Fang Strike, and I gained 2 life from the 2 attack action blocks they blocked with, and then I gained a life from the attack action block I banished, or attack action card I banished off top of the deck. So dealt a point of damage, gained 3 life, and I ripped 2 cards from their hand. Really, really powerful. The next one that's really good after Desires of Flesh is Our Desire Body. This one cares about red cards, which is pretty prominent in most decks. What this also is it allows you to gain life and draw a card. So if you compare this with a Hiss, or you tell your opponent, if they're a heavy red deck, and then you have a Hiss in your hand, this basically says this is basically a snatch, right? It's a snatch that gains you a life, essentially, and with Go Again if you have Hiss. But without Hiss, even this is basically a snatch, gain a life. So really, really powerful card. It's probably, honestly, my second favorite. Desires of Flesh is third. This is second. And my first favorite, and I think you should be running it red and blue, is Double Trouble. This card's just dumb. It doesn't technically have an on hit. Like, it doesn't care about a certain card, but it says if you've played or activated 2 or more attack reactions this chain link, it gets +2, and when it hits a hero, banish the top 2 cards of their deck. This will help Fuel's New's ability, right, to be able to activate her chi and play her opponent's blue cards, because you're banishing more cards and you're trying to find those blue cards. But at red, when you Hiss this comes as a basically a 2-card 8 off Tunic. It gets +2 because you play Hiss and then you play the Slither that you created potentially. Well, not 2-card 8, but 3-card 8 because you have to have a blue in order to get that Slither. But you can do other stuff like Flick Knives or Black Text or whatever to get the 2 reactions. But at red, this comes in for 8 off 2 reactions, and at blue, it comes in for 6. Very, very powerful card. I love seeing this at any point in the game. It tells your opponent, like, if you want to be safe and block this out and not let me deal any damage or banish any cards, you're gonna have to block 8, and that feels really bad when you see a 3-power attack that you have to block 8 of. It's really difficult. So Double Trouble, Our Desire Body, and Desires of Flesh, I think, are the 3 most consistent. When it comes to like I guess meta dependent would be the best word for it. The first one's Mind's Desire. This one's still really good. It's basically Slay the Scholars, but for new. It cares about non-attack action cards, so similar to Desires of Flesh. If you banish a card off top of their deck, it's a non-attack action, you gain a life. But if they block with non-attack actions, you also gain a life. So it's really good for that. I don't think this is bad. I definitely think you run this at red if you're like trying to go for an Arachne style list where you're trying to care about everything that could potentially be in a person's deck. But overall, it's just not quite as consistent as the other 3, but it's still very, very good. The next one is Bonds of Attraction. I've loved and hated this card. So not hated, but I've loved and not been impressed with this card so far. When it hits a hero, banish the top card of their deck, then banish a card from their graveyard. Whenever this banishes a card, if it banishes another card with the same color, gain 1. So this is better than Bonds of Memory, which we'll talk about here in a second, because it only cares about the same color. But it all depends. Like, it's a weird thing, because if you banish a red, you don't. The reason it's weird for me is because let's say you banish a red off the top of their deck, and then you go to their grave to banish a card, you want to banish a blue in a lot of situations because you want to be able to play that blue later, right? Against Zen, I want to banish a blue attack action, so when I activate new, I can play it, right? So, and then against Guardian, you want to banish a Cranial Crush or a Debilitate blue or something like that, so you can play it later. But if you banish the red, then you have to decide, is that blue more important for later, or is the gaining the life right now more important, right? So especially if you activate Mask of Perdition and you for some reason banish, if you're writing that card, and you some reason banish 2 reds, well, now do I want to gain 2 life? Because I already gained 1, but do I want to gain 1 more by banishing another red, or do I now want to take advantage and gain a blue? Some people might see that as flexibility, but I see it's kind of like New's ability is now contradicting what this card wants to do. However, on the bright side, if you banish a blue, then you just gained a life and you fueled her ability for later in the game. So it is pretty good, but I find it being a little bit weird. The other thing that's nice about this card is you tell your opponent, okay, if I attack for 3 here, and let's say they do not want it to hit and they're playing around an attack reaction like Hiss or Venomous Bite, they have to block with 2 cards, and they basically can't block with 2 cards of the same color because you will still gain a life. I mean, they can. Sometimes they might not just care, right? I'm insinuating that the opponent will care. But they'll allow you to gain a life if they block with 2 of the same color. So there's that. Then the last two that I haven't been impressed with, the number one, most one I haven't been impressed with is Impulsive Desire, because it's basically Nyx the Nimble for new, because it cares about reaction cards. It could be good, but the thing with Nyx the Nimble that made it even playable, in my opinion, was because it's a 1-for-5, which is really good. Overrate technically, so it got around defense reactions, whereas this, like, it's gonna hit the least out of everything, and like as far as gain a life, and it only attacks for 3. So this one's kind of like for me. If we got into a heavy warrior meta, maybe you could see this being really good, honestly. But it's definitely a sideboard card, or like just a meta dependent card. The one that I've had the least care about is Bonds of Memory. So funny they named it Bonds, because it cares about a card with the same name, just like Bonds of Ancestry. But it says when it hits a hero, banish top card of their deck, then banish a card from their graveyard. Whenever this banishes a card, if they banish another card with the same name, gain a life. So you have to somehow have, not somehow, but you have to get lucky enough to have the same name of the top card you banished also in the grave. It can be a little bit dicey. It doesn't really allow you to target blue cards, which is what you want to target. You're forced to banish a certain card, and that certain card also has to get lucky enough to match. So like early game, this almost never gains a life, and then late game, you're wanting to banish a blue card. So if you don't have the same name of the blue card, you lose out on the life gain, which also sucks in the late game because you want to life gain. I think Bonds of Memory is probably my least favorite card out of all of them. But yeah, so that's where I have them. The top 3 are Double Trouble, Art of Desire, Body, and Desires of Flesh. My kind of mid-tier ones are Mind's Desire and Bonds of Attraction, and then my 2 least favorite are Bonds of Memory and Impulsive Desire. But all these, keep in mind, if you're new to the class, don't fall into the same mistake that a lot of assassins fall into, which is, in my opinion, which is just like playing the cards that are perceived to be okay at all times. The meta is going to change, right? If we go into a heavy warrior meta, then Impulsive Desire all of a sudden gets better, right? If we go into a all blue Mistveil meta, then Bonds of Attraction might be really good, because you're going to see a lot of the same color card with a lot of blues, right? So keep in mind that when you're making these decisions for your deck as time moves forward. Hopefully we get some good Majestics, and I can remake a video of this and kind of talk about how that implicates all of these. But this has been really fun. Also, bonus thing, we'll talk about the new card here really quick. I might as well, so I don't have to make a whole video for it. Gorgon's Gaze. Create a Slither in your hand. It's an attack reaction that costs 2 at yellow, blocks 3. Create a Slither in hand. Banish all defending attack action cards on the combat chain. If a Chi was pitched to play this, you may play the banished cards this combat chain without paying their mana costs, right? So you're able, instead of activating New's ability, I guess, you're playing this. Or you could activate New's ability and then also play the cards they're blocking with on top of the cards and banish. So this has some really interesting implications. The 2 cost is a little steep. However, I do think that you have the cost to pay for, especially on a new turn. On a New's ability turn, you have the resources, because you're not like emptying your hand before you activate New, so you should have the 2 floating, in my opinion. This, in my opinion, it replaces Spreading Plague, I guess, is the best way. This is all initial impressions, by the way. It replaces Spreading Plague, because Spreading Plague was a late game card where you were trying to stack Blood Rot tokens and like finish the game. This card could do the same thing, where you activate New's ability and let's say you're against a Zen and you're attacking with like 6 or 7 blue cards, and you're really like putting a lot of pressure on them, so they're just going to block you out to try to stay alive. And they block with like red, Companion of the Claw and Bittering Thorns and like all the stuff that they probably have in their hand that they were trying to keep for offense. Then you just play them, right? You're able to play those as well. And now you're playing like, I've already had a 14 damage turn against a Zen with their own cards. So if you add on to that, it makes it even worse. Then you have certain cards like, you park this in Arsenal and you wait for a Chi second cycle. Especially like you pitch this away first cycle, then second cycle you park it in Arsenal, you wait for your Chi, you activate Chi, and let's say you're playing a Bravo. Guardian's the easiest one to use because it's probably where it's gonna have the most application. You activate New, and then all of a sudden, you can, and like when you activate New, especially off of her legendary specialization, or if you can just get a Slither in hand, like being able to play Blue Debilitate, and then you Slither it because it says any attack gets go again for free. and then they ban it. Let's say they block with a Spinal, and then you react with this, and then you attack with Spinal Crush, right? You could there is a world where off of 2 resources and a new activation, you could be dealing like upwards of 20 plus damage on an opponent with their own cards with on hits. That's very, very scary. So I think that this is definitely worth at a 1 or 2 of in the sideboard. I think it goes into certain matchups where you think it's going to work the best, i.e. I think Guardian would be really good. I think Guardian's probably the main option right now to use this. You also could potentially, I'm trying to think of cards that decks that have a lot of action point economy. You could use this a lot against Bolton potentially, because you're not going to get a lot from music activation off of like playing blue cards, because he doesn't run blue cards, but you're able to run his non-blue cards with this reaction. So it all depends. I think it's definitely good enough to run. I can see why it's a Majestic, because the ceiling of this card is insane if you have Slithers in hand. And again, I think this directly replaces Spreading Plague in my opinion. But that's just my initial thoughts. I definitely want to test it, see how it goes. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this card. I'm super excited about it. It's really cool, and the artwork's just sick. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. If not, me, it's totally fine. Go to another creator. But leave a like, comment, subscribe on their stuff so we can get more people seeing this game. Let me know what other videos you want to see. I'm going to be nerding out and stuff. I'm waiting on the Zen stuff because I really think we have to see Zen's power cards this weekend before we even start talking about Zen, because right now Zen's just a commoner deck, to be frank with you. We need his power cards to bring all the pieces together, which right now every class is waiting on 4 Majestics, essentially, because there's like 2 Ninja and 2 Mystic Ninja Majestics left. At Assassin, there's 1 Assassin, because this one was just revealed, or 1 Mystic Assassin and 2 Assassin Majestics left, and then same thing with Illusionist. So a lot of the pieces that are going to bring these molds together have not been revealed yet. So keep that in mind when you're talking about these decks. Yeah, thank y'all so much. Y'all have a great day, and I'll see y'all next time.